Hey, I'm Ashley.
And I'm Chris, and this is Business by the Books.
Welcome to the Business by the Books podcast, where we believe that leaders are readers. So if you're not reading, you're really not leading. Today's first ever episode of Business by the Books.
Yay.
Yes, we made it. We made it to episode 1. In this first podcast episode, we are going to be talking about the book, The 5 Voices, and that is by Jeremie Kubicek and Steve Cockram, and it was written in 2016, which feels like forever ago. And it's really the tagline of the book is how to communicate effectively with everyone you lead. Yep. So this is one of Daddy's favorite books, I think, of all time.
Because I talk about it all the time.
All the time. And so we're going to get really into it. This is one of his favorite things to talk about, just the concepts within this book. So if you want to go ahead and kind of, what is the book about? This is like our main theme. What is it about?
So kind of giving a little context. I travel a fair amount, and it's weird with this whole COVID thing. I haven't traveled in like 90 days. Last time I was in San Diego back in early March.
Normally you're traveling like every other
It's crazy.
Week or once
yeah.
every 3
I mean,
weeks.
I'm usually traveling, 2 or 3 times a month.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's been good to stay home.
Yeah.
Got to do a little reading, which is good for a guy that likes to read. Mm-hmm. But I was in South Carolina last year, and John Miller, and a group of guys had read this book. And so I went over there just to kind of see them and talk to them about their business. And in like 2 or 3 minutes, they explained this book to me. And they were almost they're as excited as I am now. It's how they were excited. And literally 2 or 3 minutes, they explained the whole book.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those kind of things, the concept is very easy to understand. And once you get it, you can actually integrate it into your life. And that's one of the challenges in a lot of books. You'll read a book and you'd be like, well, how do I apply this? There's no question. Once you read this, it just clicks and you figure out how to integrate it into your everyday life.
Yeah, exactly. Sweet. Well, obviously, as far as the book itself, Daddy's going to go into the concepts of it, but it is something that really you've applied in a lot of ways. So with that being said, what is the actual book itself about?
So the book's it's called The 5 Voices, obviously. And so when you and I speak, we have what we think people hear, but then on the other side, like when I talk to you, and sometimes I'm not real good about this, that you may not hear what I intend. And so we all have a voice. And so kind of the subtitle is, what's it like to be on the other side of you? And so we'll just kind of run through the 5 voices. And so I'll just tell you what they are, and then I'll go back and explain it. But to me, one of the geniuses of the 2 authors is that the names of the voice, it almost describes it in and of itself. So I'll just run through them. One's a pioneer, you have a connector, you have a creative, you have a guardian, and a nurturer. And if I gave you a blank piece of paper and said, hey, Ashley, give me a definition of what you think those are, I bet you would probably get most of them, right? So let's kind of run through them. So pioneer, when you tend to think about pioneer, you tend to think about someone who takes a hill. A lot of times generals, politicians, we have President Trump, who's president right now.
He is
a pioneer, and they usually take the hill. Sometimes they run over people. They're visionaries. They see things that other people don't, and they mobilize groups of people to move to that point. So anyway, that's a pioneer. The next one is the connector, and a connector is a salesperson. And so like we have a couple of friends of the family, Mr. Bobby, Bobby Wright would be one, Tommy Preck would be another, and I'm sure that they're both going to listen to this.
Hi, Mr. Tommy. Hi, Mr. Bobby.
So when you put them in a room full of people, within a relatively short period of time, they know everybody. Connectors are very valuable in an organization because they get connected and they find out what people do. So if you start telling them like your back aches, they've already got 3 doctors you can call. So sometimes a connector, when they're off kilter, they don't listen to people because they're so busy trying to help everybody else. The next one's the creative. And when I think about creative people, Steve Jobs always comes to the top. And you know I like Steve Jobs and a lot of the great vision things that he had. Creative people can be very artistic. They can be very musical. They tend to be kind of lonely because they're very frustrated because they see things that other people don't. So if you have that voice, you have to understand, you have to be patient with people because they have to you have to communicate to them what you're seeing and help them. You have to paint a picture for them. And the guys that wrote this book did a great job. The next one's The Guardian, and you and I are not guardians.
We're not.
And we tend to give guardians a hard time. I'm an engineer, we kind of talked about that in the intro, and engineers tend to be very guardian.
Yeah.
And so for me, because I'm not a guardian, having worked with engineers my whole life, I really wish I'd read this book back in 1995, 25 years ago, because I really think I would have been more effective in my communication, because a guardian they ask a lot of questions. And thank God for the guardians, because if we didn't have guardians, bridges would fall down, wings would fall off airplanes. They tend to be very skeptical.
Yeah.
And so if you have a pioneer, which is what I am, and you're working with a guardian, the pioneer has to do a better job building a bridge, in order to get the guardian to trust where they are. And so I spent a lot of my life frustrated, which is one reason I love this book so much, because I didn't do a good job with the guardians in my life building that bridge so they felt comfortable, following me and following my ideas. And then the last one's the nurturer. I don't remember the statistics, but most women, one of their dominant voices is a nurturer. And it's what makes homes work. It's what makes people feel welcome. Nurturers are kind of the glue in an organization because they're very sensitive to how people feel. Pioneers can run over nurturers. And so as a leader, actually, we make everybody in your organization take this test. It's free. It's 5voices.com. You can go take it. It's free. But I have a graph that kind of plots where everybody is, so it helps me as a leader understand everybody's voice, so that when we get together in meetings, I'm making sure I'm connecting the dots with the organization.
Yeah.
So it's a great vehicle. It's very practical on a personal level, but it's also very practical as a leader because it helps you structure the organization to be more healthy.
Yeah. So which ones are you?
So I'll tell you what I'm not, okay? I'm not a nurturer, and it doesn't mean I really care about people, but I get really impatient, and I'm not a guardian. So those two were like really low, and I can be a guardian because I've got degrees in mechanical engineering, and you're taught to be a guardian and question things, but I find questions are exhausting, and so anyway, I'm not those. I'm definitely a pioneer. I'm a connector, which means I love selling. I also love helping people out, and then I'm creative.
Yeah.
And so those three things are almost dominant. Pioneer's a little bit above, but I'm very dominant in those three, and then the other two are very low. So.
Well, I took the test yesterday.
Oh, you did?
Yes,
Okay.
I did. And my first one is I'm a connector.
Okay, that's good.
So,
I can see that.
Yeah, and so I'm a connector. And it says you are a champion of relationships and strategic partnerships, which I like to think that I am. Yeah. And then my second one, you want to guess what my second one was?
I'd say creative. You're super creative.
My secondary is creative. And then my third is pioneer. So,
yeah. Oh, wow. Okay.
So where did I get that from? Yeah. And then my last two are definitely the nurturer. And then my last one is the guardian, which I believe that my fiance is a guardian.
Yeah, he's a
so
guardian.
that's interesting.
And thank God for the guardians.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He gives me stability.
Stability and structure.
Yeah, stability and structure, because I have none. So, yes. But, it was really interesting, you just talking about all of those, because I definitely relate, obviously, to the connector and the creative, absolutely. And it's fun thinking about how when you understand your voice, it makes you a much better communicator. And that's kind of the whole point. It's right. It's like how to effectively communicate with the people that you lead. And if you don't even understand what you're saying and how you communicate, you can't lead anybody.
Well, and I remember one time, I think I was 12, and Dr. Dick Maples was preaching at First Baptist Church Bryan, and he said something, and he was probably talking to people who are married, but anyway, as a 12-year-old, isn't it crazy? I mean, that's like 40 years ago.
Yeah.
But the gist of his comment was, it doesn't matter what you say, it matters what people hear.
Exactly.
And that's huge. And I think sometimes is if we would take time to say, when I'm talking, or my body language, when I'm communicating with someone, how is that being received? If we spend as much time thinking about that as we do communicating, I think would actually be heard a lot more.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's one thing I really appreciate and love. You and I both really enjoy the personality tests. And I have a couple friends back at A&M that also are very passionate about the personalities. And the thing that is so nice about this specifically whereas the Myers-Briggs and other tests, Myers-Briggs is my personal favorite, but where this is really nice is it breaks it down where anybody can understand it. You explain that in 5 minutes, right?
Yeah,
and that's so much easier to understand and comprehend, and it's still relatable to everybody.
Right. Well, in your effectiveness as a human being, not even just as a leader, your effectiveness is your ability to communicate ideas to people, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can be the smartest person in the world and the most gifted, but if you can't communicate those things to other people, all of that knowledge is wasted. And so anyway, I'm obviously a big pro on this book because I just think it helps people. It's a very practical tool.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. Well, obviously this is one of your favorite books, and so within that, what is one of your favorite parts about the book? Favorite quote, favorite chapter, favorite concept?
So one of the things that we've done, and I'll give Ashley some credit, is we've got, if you're listening, you can't see this, but if you're watching this, so we've got a little sheet that we've done on each one of these books. And so we've got several different sections. So one of the things that we have on here is what's the favorite chapter or the favorite quote. So one of the things that I thought was really genius in this concept is we all have parts of our voices. We all have 5 voices. And so sometimes I have to be a guardian, I have to be a nurturer, but I don't want to spend most of my time using that voice, okay? So they basically call it the 70-30 rule, and it's on page 155. And so the concept says, if you're using the voices that come most naturally to you 70% of the time, you'll always have the energy to do the 30% of activities that require you to use your 4th and 5th voices, right? So every human being, you have to use the 5 voices. Yeah. So the problem is if you are spending most of your time using a voice that's not your voice, it's exhausting to you. It's tremendously frustrating. So if you're a leader, you can kind of orchestrate your team and those kind of things so that you can control that. But if you're an employee, that can be really difficult unless you have a really good relationship with everybody around you, and maybe your boss, if you've got a really good boss, you can come in and maybe share the 5 voices with him and say, look, I'm having to do some things that I don't really want to do. I don't mind doing it sometimes, but maybe we can change some things and structure it so I can do more things. So for example, kind of in my life, if in my previous jobs I was forced to do a lot of guardian things, I get frustrated about it. It's exhausting for me. But if I went to my boss and said, look, I've got some really creative ideas that I think can make the company a lot of money or help us be successful, why don't you let me focus on those things? And let's just try it for 3 or 6 months. And if we generate a lot of work and everybody's making money, everybody's happier, then you can just let me keep doing this. So anyway, this once again provides a platform, even as an employee, to go to your boss and help the organization become more effective so that you can use the voice that you were designed to use.
Yeah. Ooh, we like that.
Deep thoughts.
Yes, deep thoughts. So specifically, and I know you kind of already touched on it, but one of our blocks, I should probably explain the way that every single podcast is going to go is the way that we've laid this spreadsheet out. And so we talked about what the book is about, and we talked about favorite concept. And then this next part is kind of the key point, one of the key points of this entire podcast, which is how does this actually apply? What are the actual takeaways from this book? How can we use this tool that this book is really providing in a way to make our businesses grow and make our influence as leaders and as followers grow as well? So I know you already touched on that, but maybe what are some additional applications and takeaways?
Yeah, so a lot of this, like you said, the word's execution. And I think Thomas Edison said that ideas without execution are hallucination, right? So if you read a book and you can't apply it, well, you've probably been better off not reading that book. Yeah. So one of the chapters I really like, and it's chapter 9, and it's entitled Understanding Your Weapon System, which I think is genius. I think because we can all relate to, the military, and you got different things. And so one of the stories they talk about is a pioneer and a nurturer when they're working together. So a pioneer's like a rocket-propelled grenade, is after they start talking, all you hear is boof, it's just that rocket being fired off. And the nurturer, as soon as the pioneer fires that off, they can be very destructive. the nurturer's in the corner grabbing their medic bag, so the nurturer's the medic. And so I think that is a genius way to really kind of help us understand in a military context, you've all got weapons and you have to be very careful. Sometimes the weapons are powerful, right? Like an RPG, if you're in the military, it can do great things, but if it's not used properly, it can do destructive things too. You can have, people that die by friendly fire. And so I thought that was a really good chapter to kind of help visualize. And the thing I wrote here says the real power in using the 5 voices is in building healthy teams that are able to understand one another and avoid the dysfunctions that so often plague teams and organizations that don't know how to listen to each other. And so, you can build this concept of the 5 voices into the culture of your organization. And once again, is if people understand their voice and they understand other people's voices, it just creates so much more function within the group.
Yeah. Sweet. That's awesome. So specifically within ADV, how have you seen this play out? I know that you mentioned you have everybody take this test.
Yep.
But just within conversation or even within projects, how have you kind of seen this come about?
So without giving any specific names,
yes,
okay, so I'll speak contextually. But so for example, with the guardians in the company, we actually have quite a few guardians, right?
Which makes sense.
Is number one, I deeply appreciate them because they're into the numbers, right? That it's the devil's in the details. And so I realized that they're going to ask me questions, but I don't get defensive. I've really worked intentionally to say, look, if they're asking questions, they're just asking so they can understand. They're not questioning me because they want to tear me down as the leader and all those kind of things. So I think that's part of it, is lowering that defensiveness. Okay, one is, and then another one is we have at least one in our company who's a great connector, and so I know if I need something, I go talk to him, and he's probably got a Rolodex of 8 people, and it is unbelievable in our organization. The role that he has played in terms of our hiring people, in terms of our getting equipment, and super gifted. And when he took the test, he was a connector. So we've learned, I think, as a company, and we're going to continue to get better at it, to leverage those voices so that we maximize each other. The other thing too is going back to that 70-30 rule, that you may have someone, it's not just their voice, and as an organization, we need to be really careful that we don't force people. So for example, if someone's not a connector and you're putting a lot of pressure on them to go out and sell, in our business, if you're an engineer, at some point you do need to sell, but I have to be real careful that I don't push people to do things that it's really uncomfortable for them, because that's miserable for everybody. So I would say, within the personality types we've talked about, I tend to be more the DISC because it's more simple, whereas you like the Myers-Briggs. But I like the 5 voices because it gives us a framework to have these kind of discussions, and it's an easy test you can go take online too.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of that, kind of as we close a little bit, final thoughts and call to action. We kind of touched on taking this little personality test, and there's so many of those online, but this one is relatively easy. It's about 80 questions because I took it yesterday, and it's really great.
How long did it take? About 15 minutes?
Yeah, probably about 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So it was great, and it's the thing about personality tests that are so fun is everybody likes to think and talk about themselves. So it's literally all about you. So it's 15 minutes about you, which is great. But yeah, so do you want to talk a little bit about that and the resources that are available?
So one thing I would recommend is go to the website, and it's the number 5, so 5voices.com. And so the first thing you do is take the test. And if you're in a leadership position, you take it, get a copy of the book, study it, and maybe the next month, because you need some time to kind of cogitate, as we used to say back in the Corps at A&M, cogitate on that. So before you start engaging other people. So that's the first thing. Take the test, begin to study it. And then the other thing is to be intentional in using the 5 voices and how you engage with people. And you're not trying to do Jedi mind tricks, but when you meet someone, you have a conversation, try to estimate, what is their voice? Are they a guardian? Are they a connector? And especially if they're on your team, it's extremely powerful because this person may be one of the best candidates to help you grow something. And by knowing what that voice is, you can put them in the right place. So I just think it's like a lot of things. They say, like, if you want to grow your vocabulary, that you learn a new word and you use it 3 to 5 times within a given day. It's the same thing here. Once you take the test, once you study the book, is be intentional in integrating how you interact with other people and also how you create a structure and a culture in your organization that facilitates using the 5 voices to build effective teams.
Awesome. Sweet. Well, huge shout out and thank you to Jeremie Kubicek and Steve Cockram for developing this idea, because this is something that obviously he's super passionate about. And that is super helpful, and it's been really cool just studying this concept and seeing it apply within my own life as a college student, not necessarily within an organization or anything like that, but being able to see it within my own interpersonal relationships has been cool. But yeah, wow, we finished our first episode.
Feels good.
We made it. So yes, this is just episode 1
of 50.
So this is just the beginning. We're really excited about where this is going. Feel free to check out the rest of our podcasts that we currently have up and that we will have up moving forward. Check us out on Instagram at Business by the Books. That's where you can find out a ton of information about us and what we're doing. And then as well as our website, which we are in the midst of setting up. So it is just businessbythebooks.com. That probably doesn't look good right now, so we'll get there eventually. It'll be good. But yeah, sweet. Well, do you want to close us out?
I do.
Yes, with
because
your
remember,
thing.
at Business by the Books, we believe that leaders are readers, and if you're not reading, you're not leading.
Yes, and that's so true. And I am learning more about the importance of reading so I can be a better leader. And it's a challenge. We're getting there. But yes, thank you guys so much for listening, and we will talk to you and see you in the next episode. Bye.
Thanks, bye.